What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and today we're talking tight ends, and I'm here to give you my top 5 in the 2025 NFL Draft. Now, there's no Brock Bowers in this class, but there is one tight end that I would be willing to take in the first round, and then a few more that are really interesting. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so coming in at number 5, we got Benjamin Urasek, the tight end from Georgia, who formerly played, I believe, 4 years at Stanford. He is going into his 5th season, so a little bit of an older prospect, but I've been a fan of Urasek for a while now, and I'm hoping that he finally comes out in the 2025 class. He's a 6'4 tight end, 242 pounds, so, good size for the new age tight ends. You don't see many tight ends get over that 260 mark like he did 10 years ago. So for this new age, kind of tight end, this isn't a bad size at all. And I got a top 150 grade on him. And some of the things I really like about him is he's a dynamic receiving threat. He's able to get open. He's a nuanced route runner. He knows how to get open. He knows how to find soft spots in the zone. And he knows how to, just work a defense. I think he fires out of his three-point stance with really good athleticism. I think he's athletic in general. As you can see, A- is down the board when it comes to athletics. He's got the speed to threaten down the seam. I think he could destroy teams up the middle. I think he could be a mismatch nightmare for most linebackers in the NFL. And I think he's got a really strong and reliable hand. So, the thing that you're not going to ask Urasek to do is, be an inline blocker. Although he does have, solid size, I think he's more of a move player, an H-back, maybe a big slot option. He's not a guy you're going to line up, right next to the tackle and ask to block on run plays or, anything like that. He's more of a move tight end, just a receiving threat. Some of the cons I got, not much of a blocker, like I just talked about. He's a little bit older. I don't have a verified age on him, but he's probably 23, I would guess. He'll probably be 24 as a rookie, so, he's up there in age. And he wasn't, the most productive at Stanford. It's Stanford, though. You're not going to see, the most productive tight ends coming out of Stanford. So hopefully moving to Georgia, he's able to really shine. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself because I do have another Georgia tight end a little bit later in this list that I think is going to be the starter. But regardless, I think, Georgia is a good place for Urasek. They, produce really good tight ends. Brock Bowers just last year. You got Darnell Washington. There's some really good tight ends to come out of Georgia, and they know how to use their tight ends. So I'm really excited to see what Urasek can do there at Georgia. Moving on to number 4, we got Luke Lachey, the tight end out of Iowa. And he's a bit of a bigger tight end at 6'6", 253 pounds, so really good size. And I got a top 100 grade on him. The thing with Luke Lachey, again, really good size. He can play in line or in the slot. He's a really versatile, tight end. And Iowa uses them in that way. They'll line them up in line. They'll line them up, as a move tight end. They'll line him up in the slot. He'll even line up out wide at times. I don't think he'll do that in the NFL, but at Iowa, they do that with their tight ends. They love their tight ends. If you know anything about Iowa, this might be tight end you. You got guys like T.J. Hawkinson, Sam Laporta, George Kittle. If you're a tight end that goes to Iowa, you're probably going to be pretty good in the NFL. He's got really good straight line speed. When it comes to his burst and change of direction, I think that's a little bit of a different story. I don't think he's the most fluid mover or the most bursty and twitchy athlete. But, once he gets time to build up speed, he's got really good speed. Really strong hands. As long as he's not necessarily contested, he's going to bring down the catch. He can catch it through contact. And he has the ability to block in line. Not a lot of tight end nowadays coming out of the draft are able to be a full-time inline blocker. And I think if a team wanted to draft Luke Lachey to do that, I think he could. I don't think that's the best position for him. I still think he's more of a do-it-all type of guy. He can be an inline tight end. He can be a big slot. He can be a move tight end. I think he can do basically everything. He does struggle to create separation, though. Like I said, he's not the most fluid athlete when it comes to getting in and out of his breaks. That's why his change of direction is only a B. So he struggles to create separation one-on-one. A little bit stiff as a route runner. Again, that's why he struggles to create separation. And then same with Benjamin Urasek, a little bit of an older prospect. But if a team's looking for a solid, super solid tight end 2 on a team, I think Luke Lachey can fit that role perfectly. If you want even more draft content and my full 2025 draft guide, my Patreon is the perfect thing for you. You'll get access to all of my player rankings, which are updated daily, Plus, you'll get to see my full summer eval on players, advanced stats on players, and my draft grades on them as well. Not to mention weekly mock drafts and mock draft reactions. It's the best way to support me and the channel, not to mention it's only $5. Again, only $5. You can't even get a Big Mac for that price anymore. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description or the pinned link in the comments and join the family over there on Patreon. Now, back to the video. Moving on to number 3, we got Mitchell Evans, the tight end out of Notre Dame, and now he is a big boy at 6'5", 260 pounds, and I got a top 75 grade on him. You know, the things you like about Mitchell Evans is he's a reliable chains mover. You know, he's not necessarily this, you know, daunting receiving threat at the tight end position. You know, teams aren't going to be scared of him and, you know, what he's going to do after the catch, or, you know, he's not going to, you know, tear you up the seam. But what he's going to be able to do is he's going to be able to get open and get those short yardage first downs, and that's very valuable in the NFL. I think he can be a plus inline blocker. I think this is one of the very few guys who can just be a full-time inline blocker and do that role very, very well. I think he's going to be a plus in the run game, and like I said, that's pretty rare nowadays. Super strong hands through contact. You know, if it's in his vicinity, he's going to come down with it. You know, you're not going to be able to knock the ball out of his hands, basically. And he's really good at finding soft spots in the zone. Like I said, he's not the, you know, best athlete in the world, but what he's going to be able to do is he's going to be able to read the defense, be able to find that soft spot in the zone, sit down, and catch the ball reliably. That's Mitchell Evans' game right there. Some of the cons, though, is he is coming off a torn ACL, and he already wasn't the best athlete, but as you know, knee injuries, people don't necessarily come back the same athlete, so he might even be less of an athlete than he was before the torn ACL, which is a little bit scary, but, you know, I don't want to say too much about that until we see him, you know, actually play after that torn ACL. Not the best at changing direction. Again, that'll go into his route running. He's not going to be some guy who's going to, you know, beat you deep or anything like that, or beat you up the seam. And he just struggles to create separation all around. He's a smart route runner, not necessarily a nuanced route runner. But again, that's not Mitchell Evans' game. He's going to be a really good blocker, and he's going to be able to, you know, move the chains on 3rd and 3. That's, you know, what you're going to draft Mitchell Evans for. Coming in at number 2, we got a tight end that I was, you know, hinting at earlier, and that's Oscar Delp, the tight end out of Georgia. He's 6'5", 245 pounds, so solid size, I guess. I got a projected top 50 pick on him. And he's really just a dynamic athlete and a really good receiving option. He's able to be a mismatch nightmare for linebackers because he can beat you up the seam. He's got fluid hips to be able to make really crisp cuts. And I think, despite that 245-pound frame, I think he could be a solid move blocker. And what I mean by move blocker is he's not going to go up against defensive linemen and be able to block them in the run game, but he can be that backside move blocker who can, you know, take out that can kind of chip backside defensive ends or linebackers and people on the backside. I think he's really good at that, not necessarily just straight up man blocking a defensive end. I don't think that's going to be his game, and I don't think a team should ask him to do that much. Some of the cons I got for him, though, is he hasn't been a full-time starter yet. He's been playing behind Brock Bowers, which, you know, most tight ends in the country, if they're on Brock Bowers' team, they're going to be playing behind him. He doesn't have the best production because of that. But when Brock Bowers was injured last season and Oscar Delp was thrusted into that starting role, he was pretty productive and he showed a lot of flashes. So that's why he's a bit of a projection for me, but I have really high hopes for Oscar Delp. He's a little light for the position, like I said, but he's still a solid blocker. You know, not the most nuanced route runner. I think he could develop that a little bit, and I think he will this coming season. Georgia really just asked him to, you know, do the basic tight end route tree, like a short in, a flat, a hitch, things like that. But I think he could be more if Georgia asks him to do more. And then I don't think he can block inline. I already spoke on that a little bit. A move blocker, not necessarily an inline blocker. And then after the catch, I think he's a really good athlete, and I think he can make some plays after the catch as well. And then the guy I hinted at in the intro, my number 1 tight end in this class, Colston Lelin, the tight end out of Michigan. He's the same size as Oscar Delp at 6'5", 245 pounds, although I think he carries that weight a little bit better than Oscar Delp, if that makes sense. And I do have a first-round grade on him. Not necessarily a Brock Bowers by any means. I think he's a back end of the first-round guy, not necessarily a first half of the first-round type of guy. But yeah, he's a legit receiving threat at the tight end position. He's able to run, you know, really good routes, get open against linebackers, able to find soft spots in the zone coverage. I think he's just an above average athlete who can, you know, move super fluidly, and he similar to Oscar Delp, can be a really good move blocker. You know, even a little bit better than Oscar Delp in my opinion. Some of the worries I have for him though is he doesn't show enough physicality and strength as a blocker. That's why I think he's more of a move blocker. When he was asked to straight up, man block, he didn't show the physicality and the strength that I would like to see in a tight end. You know, a guy like Mitchell Evans showed that nasty in the run blocking game. I didn't necessarily see that nasty from Colston Lelin. And then he does have somewhat inconsistent and bad hands. I believe he had I think he had a 10% drop rate on the head, which I always say if you're above that 10% drop rate, you don't have great hands. And Colston Lelin teetered on that, does he have good hands? Does he not? He had that 10% drop rate. So I'm curious to see what he does this season. If he has another season where he has a 10% drop rate, I think that'll be a bigger concern. But for now, I still have him as a B+ for his hands. And the last thing I want to touch on with Colston Lelin is, if you know Michigan is a run-first type of offense, and he was still able to produce there with 650 yards and 4 touchdowns. So if he's able to produce that high at Michigan where they want to run the ball, I think that's a very, very good sign for Colston Lelin, and that's why I think he can be a really, really dynamic receiving threat in the NFL. But that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of my rankings. I did take a look at a few more players. I just wasn't comfortable making a top 10 for these tight ends just because you'll be lucky if you see, 10 to 12 tight ends drafted in the whole draft. But some other guys that I did look at was, Brayson Nesbitt, Jake Brenningstool, and Brant Kuthi all fall into that similar range where they're just super small for the position. They don't even reach that 240-pound mark, but they're great athletes. They might just be more of a big slot and never even be asked to line up at the, inline tight end position. So those are my little knockups with them. Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end, he's also a bigger tight end at 6'6", 260 pounds, similar to that Mitchell Evans size. But he just has some really, really bad hands. He has some of the worst drops you'll ever see on tape. So that's kind of what I want to see him work on. And those are kind of the reasons why I didn't have those guys in this top 5. But let me know what you guys think of my rankings down in the comments. And if you like these type of videos, make sure to subscribe. And as always, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.